Yeah. So I want to touch on what some of the arguments I've heard are,
Sure.
and we'll just go into them a little bit. And the first one is a little bit more charitable to the He Gets Us campaign.
Right.
Which I think is important. I think we should do that. So one of the first arguments I heard came from people who are not Christian saying they shouldn't have spent this much money on a campaign.
Right.
If they really wanted to do what Jesus taught, then they should have spent that money on the poor. Right. And like I remember one person on Twitter put it like, the fact that they didn't give this money to the poor tells me that they didn't read Jesus at all.
Right.
You know?
And I actually saw someone did like a breakdown of how much that cost to have that time.
It's a lot of money.
What it could have accomplished.
Yeah. And here's the thing. All of those things are hypotheticals though.
Sure.
But my thought on that, though, is the world will always have a problem with you preaching the gospel, regardless how you do it. Now, I don't really feel like they preached the gospel here, but I feel like some unbelievers thought they were.
You're trying to give them credit for the old college try.
Yeah, the old college try. Yeah,
like they were, and I do, and I want to say that. Like I know we've been very critical, but there is a part of me, even as a pastor, that says like, while I don't agree with anything they're saying, I do have in my heart some sort of I won't say appreciation, but some kind of empathy. Maybe they did create some empathy for what they're trying to get Jesus' name out there. I think the big question is, do you need to get Jesus' name out there?
His name's already out there.
I was going to say, now we can debate that and go, but I mean, that's kind of my
greatest selling book in the history of the world is the Bible.
Right.
Okay, so when I hear this argument, though, they shouldn't have spent this money. And this is the same argument I hear people bring up about mega churches. And you and I will do a podcast sometime about mega churches and prosperity gospel and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Love it.
But one of the things that always, like when I hear people, they look at that stuff and they say, see, these Christians are hypocrites because they're spending their money on worthless things.
Right.
And like, you guys don't get it.
Right.
First of all, when you say that, you're being hypocritical because what frivolous things could you have cut out of your life and given to the poor that you didn't?
Right.
Let's be honest. Air conditioning is frivolous.
Right.
You don't need to pay your energy bill.
Yeah, we don't. No.
You should be giving that. You should be giving that energy bill money to the poor.
Sure.
Otherwise, you don't care about the poor.
You don't need two vehicles. You might not even need a vehicle.
That's the logic that's being used.
Right.
Do you see how absurd it sounds when I apply it to your everyday life?
It brings a breakdown.
Breaks down, right? So the verse that always comes up for me here is Mark 14:3-9. I'm not going to read this, but in its entirety. But this is when Jesus is in Bethany, and a woman comes in with a very expensive perfume. She breaks the perfume jar, pours it on Jesus, and is anointing him. And some people get indignant, and they're like, "Why has this been wasted? That could have been sold." It could have been sold for over 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor. And they were scolding her, but Jesus says, "Leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a good deed for me." Mm-hmm. Right? And I think this is the thing that some people maybe don't understand is that, look, if God directs you to spend $1 billion, first of all, he had to have given you that $1 billion.
Right.
To spend $1 billion on spreading the gospel.
Right.
Then do it.
Right.
Right? Like, then do it.
100%.
Like, do the good thing for God. Do the thing that he's asked you to do. Do the thing he has called you to do, not what somebody else thinks is sensible. And the thing that always stood out to me on this verse, because this is also where Jesus says, the poor you will always have with me, but I will only be with you for a short while.
Yep.
One of the things, though, that in the book of John 12:4 points out, they single out the most indignant. And who is it?
It's Judas.
Judas.
Yeah, he wants that money.
And why is he indignant? It's because he's stealing from the collection plate.
Right.
This is something else about Jesus that nobody teaches. Jesus had a collection plate.
Right. 100%.
Jesus' ministry collected money.
100%.
So what did they do with that money? They probably used it to live.
Right.
And they probably did give to the needy.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So here's Judas saying we should have gave that money to the needy, knowing that he was going to take 10% off the top.
Right.
He was tithing to himself.
Right.
Right. Typically, when somebody decries the church for how they spend their money, they're doing so not because there's an issue with how the church spent their money. They're doing so because they want to find a way to discredit the church.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
It serves their own purpose because if they discredit the church, then they're not beholden to this gospel that they know in their heart is true.
Right.
Right. The other thing about this that I want to touch on is never let the lost tell you how to save them.
Right. Right.
I think this, and I think that is a mistake that this campaign is making.
Right.
They are trying to do it on the terms of people who don't want to be saved.
Sure.
Right. You and I were having a conversation recently. We were talking about atheists and the conversation of, well, is there any evidence?
Right.
That would prove you? And more often you're seeing a lot of the new atheists admit, no,
Right.
I can explain away every piece of evidence that you want because in the end, I just don't believe it's true.
Right. And there's no desire.
There's no desire. The thing is, and then people will ask for a sign, but they're always asking for these signs that are really convenient for them.
Right.
So I saw there was a street preacher preaching at a college, and this woman says, I don't believe Jesus rose from the dead. And he says, well, these eyewitnesses say that he did.
Right.
And she says, well, if you can show me his medical charts that said he was dead and now he's alive. And she goes, ma'am, I don't have Jesus's medical charts. And she goes, well, isn't that convenient that you don't have that evidence? And it's funny. He kind of turned in that moment and he goes, no, isn't it convenient for you to ask for something you know doesn't exist?
Right.
Because they didn't have medical charts the way you understand medical charts today.
Right.
You're asking me for a Polaroid of Jesus knowing full well that cameras didn't exist.
Well, and now never mind the fact that you have all these accounts of Jesus raising.
Right.
Literally in a book. I mean, and they try to discredit that as not evidence. And I think I think part of the problem with the campaign here is, like you said, and you said it's spot on, never let the unsaved tell you how to save them, because they don't know how to be saved. That's why they're
right.
But I think that's the trap that they fall into here is could the money have been used for other things? Sure, but let's go back and let's go look at that. The woman anoints Jesus's feet. Mm-hmm. It's very clear who she's anointing, and it's very clear why she's anointing. There is no ambiguity here. She is blessing Jesus. She's literally washing his feet with perfume.
Yeah.
So taking on that servant role, which Jesus is affirming, saying, literally it turns an exclamation point. It says, leave her alone. Like he yells at him, says, leave her alone. So Jesus gets indignant, says, leave her alone. So she's doing what he has basically taught, but she's elevating Christ. I don't see this and all the money being spent elevating Christ. I see it elevating this ambiguous, like I said, self-serving Jesus.
Yeah.
Not the Jesus who gets indignant and says, leave her alone. There is a right and a wrong.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And what she's doing was prophetic as well. She was preparing him for burial.
Right.
And this isn't doing that. But don't hit me with Jesus wouldn't have spent his money this way, because you don't know how Jesus would have spent his money.
Right.
You're only saying that to be discrediting. And, going further with that, we love the darkness.
100%.
And people who are in the darkness don't want to be exposed to the light.
Right.
So when they tell you, this is how to expose me to the light, they're saying that in a way that lets them stay in their darkness.
Right.
So we have to just speak the truth in love and gentleness and kindness, which is a good message, but the truth, even when gentle and kind, can't offend if you don't want to hear it.
Right.
Right?
100%. And like you said, most of the people who have that concern probably see themselves as being the ones who would benefit from that money.
Yeah.
Just like a Judas. Like I could be taking my 10% off of this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So